Well, good afternoon, and thank you for coming today. We all agree that Americans pay too much for prescription drugs, and we need to come together as Republicans and Democrats to change the law and help lower costs on drugs while not reducing cures for diseases. We shouldn't have to be up here today, frankly. We shouldn't have to plead with the Speaker to stop her progress forward on H.R. 3, a very partisan bill that has frankly created roadblocks to bipartisan reform that would result in getting lower priced medicines to our constituents and cures for those who have diseases. Enough's enough. It doesn't have to be this way, and it's time for Congress to step up and act in a bipartisan way. We have a clear directive from the American people. Kaiser Family Foundation poll found that 75% of American people want reducing drug costs to be a top priority for Congress. 65% agree that with that plan, they don't want it to reduce access to cures. Speaker Pelosi's partisan drug pricing scheme ignores this simple truth. The Budget Office, the Congressional Budget Office, has told us they expect upwards of 15 fewer cures as a result of the Democrats' plan. The Council of Economic Advisors says that could be up to 100 fewer cures because of H.R. 3, the Democrats' plan. If you don't believe the CBO, look overseas. Countries with government-imposed price controls have drastically reduced research and development spending by 11 to 16%. The majority of these countries have less than half the new medications that are available in the United States. These are not third world countries, by the way. These are developed countries, but they have upwards of half of the new medications that are available here in the United States. For example, for diabetes medication, France only has 30% of the new treatments that Americans have. Australia has half as many new cancer drugs as we have in the United States. Japan has less than two-thirds of the new respiratory medicines that are available to American patients. Of the 270 new medicines available in the United States, only 41% are available in Australia, 52% in Canada, 53% in France, 67% in Germany, 48% in Japan, and 64% in the United Kingdom. Restricted access to miracle drugs can be a matter of life and death. If you're a patient in Australia with hemophilia, a patient in France with lung cancer, a child in Canada with cystic fibrosis, or a child in the United Kingdom with Batten disease. The point is we simply do not know what cures will be lost because of the Democrats' plan, and neither do they. We could miss out on new drugs to cure Alzheimer's, rare cancer, or ALS. Despite what H.R. 3's cheerleaders have stated, it is not worth it, as they said, to lose potential new cures in order to pass H.R. 3. This is the Speaker, as the Washington Post noted earlier this year, quote, putting a political pothole in the way of bipartisan drug pricing. Simply doesn't have to be this way. So let me talk about our legislation, H.R. 19. The Lower Costs, More Cures Act uses bipartisan reforms to lower out-of-pocket spending, to protect access to new medicines and cures, and strengthen transparency and champion competition. I want to reiterate that every single provision in the alternative is bipartisan. This could actually become law. We truly could lower drug costs for consumers without destroying American innovation. We can have both. The Lower Cost, More Cures Act encourages innovation of groundbreaking new cures, promotes low-cost options for patients, and curbs how drug companies can game the system. It prevents drug manufacturers from withholding samples of their drugs in order to delay patients' access to generic competition. It stops pay-for-delay agreements in which the brand-name drug manufacturer pays the generic manufacturer to keep a genetic equivalent off the market. It ends game even of the patent system, including preventing drug manufacturers from receiving additional patent exclusivity periods for drugs newly deemed biologics. It allows FDA authority to approve multiple generic applications of the same drug, resulting in more generic competition and speeding cures to market. As you know, our reforms of the FDA in the past Congress have resulted in 1,171 new generic drugs. That's a record in FY 2019 and for the FDA. This sort of legislation works. Our bill would increase transparency and remove uncertainty at the pharmacy counter by requiring insurance companies to make information about drug costs available in the doctor's office before the prescription is written. It expands online cost estimate tools so patients and seniors can shop around and better know how much they'll have to pay for their treatment before they set their next appointment. It encourages more biomedical research, promotes more low-cost generic and biosimilar options for patients, and it stops pharmaceutical gaming of the system. It places a cap for the first time on seniors' out-of-pocket drug costs and allows seniors to manage their annual out-of-pocket spending. It reduces the cost of insulin and increases transparency and removes uncertainty at the pharmacy counter. For example, we'll have a cap for seniors in Medicare Part D for their insulin at $50 after deductible. It also cuts the cost of drug administration, including cancer treatment, for Medicare beneficiaries in half. H.R. 19 could be just the beginning. Republicans are ready to do more, to work together with our colleagues on the other side of the aisle to do what the American people want most, and that is to lower prescription drug prices for Americans. So let's get to work and deliver meaningful solutions to the American people. With that, I'll turn it over to my friend and colleague, the Republican leader of the Ways and Means Committee, Kevin Brady.
Greg, thank you for the work that you and Virginia are doing on accelerating cures for Americans. Why should patients have to choose between affordable medicines and life-saving cures for Alzheimer's, ALS, Parkinson's, or cancer? Why should parents with sick children be forced to wait longer for the newest drug breakthrough that could save their lives? And why should Americans face a shorter life because the truly costliest drug is the one that is never created? At the depths of Nancy Pelosi's drug bill is a dangerous trade-off. Lower prices in the short term, but fewer life-saving cures in the future. And not just a few cures lost, but many, according to the Independent Congressional Budget Office and Council of Economic Advisors. The California Life Sciences Association predicts that nearly 9 of 10 new drugs would never be made available, never, from their researchers and small biotech companies if the Pelosi drug bill becomes law. This is a cruel and false choice, which is why this bill will quickly die with no bipartisan support in the Senate. As Republicans, we believe we need to do both, lower drug prices and accelerate life-saving cures. Our bill, the Lower Cost More Cures Act, lowers out-of-pocket costs for Americans by cracking down on overpriced drugs, empowering seniors to choose the right place for their treatments, which can cut the cost of chemotherapy by half, pulling back the curtain on those who set drug prices, forcing drug companies to justify their increases and list their prices in their advertising. We accelerate, not kill, life-saving medical cures. We permanently make it easier for Americans to deduct high medical expenses from their taxes, allow them to use their health savings account for over-the-counter drugs, including feminine products, and save seniors over $300 a year on their medicines in the popular Medicare prescription drug program. All these proven ideas are bipartisan. All of these can be passed by Congress, and all of these can be signed by President Trump this year if Democrats abandon their partisan games and continue the bipartisan work that got shelved for the Pelosi drug bill. I'll finish with this. As a new member of the Ways and Means Committee in 2003, we, the Republican Congress, joined with President George W. Bush to create an affordable drug plan for seniors. Back then, Leader Nancy Pelosi and Democrats tried their best to kill it. She famously predicted that creating the crucial Part D prescription plan for the elderly, quote, would end Medicare as we know it. Can you imagine how many seniors' lives would have been lost if she had succeeded in stopping the Affordable Medicare drug program 43 million seniors have come to depend upon? Nancy Pelosi and Democrats were dangerously wrong then. Can Americans risk the pain and the loss of our loved ones when Democrats are dangerously wrong again? With that, let me introduce the ranking member, Republican leader of Education and Labor, Virginia Foxx.
Thanks, Chairman Brady. Thank you, Chairman Walden. The Lower Cost More Cures Act will really deliver for the American people. The rising cost of prescription drugs is a serious problem that requires a serious approach. That's why congressional efforts to bring down drug costs for the American people have been and should continue to be a collaborative and bipartisan effort. Unfortunately, Speaker Pelosi's H.R. 3 sabotaged bipartisan efforts by Congress to enact a meaningful solution to this growing problem. The radical approach taken by H.R. 3 will eliminate choice and competition, jeopardize innovation, investment, and access to future cures, putting breakthrough treatment for diseases like Alzheimer's, cancer, sickle cell disease, and others at risk, as my colleagues have said today. Democrats have said it is worth it to lose new cures in order to pass H.R. 3. One cure lost is one too many. Congress shouldn't be pursuing policies that will harm the health and well-being of American patients. And we shouldn't destroy a system that allows the U.S. to lead the way in new cures and treatments. That is why we've introduced H.R. 19, the Lower Cost, More Cures Act. This bill contains measures that have bipartisan support in the House and the Senate, and as Chairman Walden has so eloquently talked about, really could be an answer to many, many issues we're facing. The Lower Cost, More Cures Act is a common sense, bipartisan solution that will help lower out-of-pocket costs, protect access to new medicines and cures, strengthen transparency and accountability, and champion competition. It is a great opportunity for us in the Congress to achieve something really, really meaningful. Thank you very much.
We'd
Mr.
be
Walden?
happy to take your questions.
Mm-hmm.
Can I ask, like, what you're gonna do with the bill? Is this, something you're gonna offer as a sort of an alternative on the floor? Should we see this as sort of a messaging? This is what we're gonna do. I was curious about what you do from here. Are you gonna gather co-sponsors?
Yes. Yes, all the above. H.R. 19 will be introduced. We have a fairly long list of co-sponsors who will be joining us. We think it is a substantive, full-throated alternative that can pass and become law. It is comprehensive in its nature. It is bipartisan in its content. We'll be going to the Rules Committee to ask the chairman of the Rules Committee to give us an opportunity to have an up or down vote on this as an alternative, as a substitute. When Chairman Brady mentioned the Medicare Part D, we were both here for that. My now Chairman Pallone went to the Rules Committee and said that he thought Democrats should have the opportunity to have a substitute and a motion to recommit, and they were given both. We're going to ask for the same courtesy, that we be given an opportunity to have our bill on the floor as a substitute and as another opportunity for legislation on the motion to recommit. We did that for them on H.R. 3, the last major drug bill Congress has considered, and we would hope, especially given all the announcements Chairman McGovern and others made at the beginning of the session about an open process here, that they would open up, at least give us one alternative, which would be H.R. 19. But I'll turn over to my colleagues.
No, I would think we would get bipartisan support because these are 40 bipartisan measures that have either been approved in committee, sponsored and led by our Democrat friends, or passed key Senate committees as well. So certainly no reason to hold back on bipartisan consensus. The country kind of needs consensus right now, especially on lowering drug prices.
You said you had a long list of co-sponsors coming. Are any of those Democrats? And then also, I understand that these are largely bipartisan because they've passed one committee or another at some point. Is there anything that is new that is sort of untested, or are these all things that, like you said, have passed either House or Senate committees?
Well, I would say, from my perspective, a lot of what's in here is also what's been out in the public and talked about in the Grassley-Wyden legislation. It's not the whole bill. It's probably upwards of 90% of it. There are other provisions, as I outlined here, creates and pay to delay and the Anti-Blocking Act, and other provisions dealing with, for example, the cap on seniors' out-of-pocket expense. First time that's ever been there. Senior now, $3,100 cap for the year, and we allow smoothing, which is you could pay that over time, but you'd never, now they'd have certainty and never spend more than $3,100, and you could pay it over time, not just one opportunity. As for co-sponsors, it is open. Any Democrat that wants to join us is more than welcome. I would say, however, we were in great negotiations with our colleagues on the Energy and Commerce Committee on the Democratic side until the Speaker's office interceded. Those conversations ended, and we ended up with H.R. 3 handed to the committee, and that was kind of a fait accompli at that point, and I'm afraid it's become a leadership-driven partisan issue. Hopefully, when we disgorge that, we can get back to the real bipartisan work that we're known for.
Yes, ma'am.
One quick follow-up on that question from Sarah. Just one of the provisions that's kind of gotten some attention is the provision on a chief negotiator with the USTR. And to my understanding, that was a provision included in Congressman Meadows' bill, right? Is that a bipartisan provision?
You know, I think there is strong bipartisan support for that. I think everyone recognizes that the disparity on how drugs are priced around the world is unfair. Rather than adopt the very worst practices of our foreign countries, which delay life-saving cures, blocks them for the most part, in many cases, from their patients, make sure they're not created in those countries either. We think that's exactly the wrong solution. But empowering a specific trade negotiator to enter into the discussions with those countries so we can level that playing field, we think that's crucial. One point that Greg just made is, look, we were working toward a bipartisan consensus on lowering drug prices. All of that got shelved for this partisan exercise. I think in part because Democrats are getting so hammered on impeachment, where the American public can't frankly name one thing this Democrat majority has done or accomplished in Congress. So they are rushing it to the floor this week. It is better than a doornail. We're hopeful that when that's done, we can join together back on the path of consensus. I think the work that Virginia has done, Greg has done, we've done Ways and Means Committee, deserves and can get to the president's desk this year.
One more question on that. Or did you want to add anything?
I'm good.
Okay. I guess my question now is why now? Why do you introduce this now? Because Congressman Walden, you introduced an amendment at the E&C markup on H.R. 3 that was really substantially similar to this bill.
Right.
So, and that was in October. So
Right.
why wait until now?
Well, we held out hope that we would have an opportunity to continue to work on this issue with the Democrats, but that hope's been dashed. We were out for quite a bit in November, as you know, and we came together on this bill after the markup, you're right, because we wanted to then get together and say, what are the bipartisan provisions that we could put together in a bill that would be a substantive package going forward? And there are things you can go back and look that we had as amendments in Energy and Commerce that were Republican-only amendments that we didn't include in this bill because we truly care about trying to solve this issue for the American people, getting drug costs down without sticking it to cures. And as you know, the Congressional Budget Office says between 8 and 15 cures could be lost. The Council of Economic Advisors says upwards of 100 could be lost. We don't think that's what the American people want. The polling shows they don't. We don't want that. And so we put together a balanced package that looked at what the Senate was doing, looked at what might be able to get done, and we're open to talking about these provisions. This is not a closed-door, take-it-or-leave-it bill, but we thought, okay, if they're not going to work with us on amendments in their bill, then we'll put forward our alternative. We believe this is both substantive and would make a big difference in the marketplace without upending research and development on new medicines. Yeah.
Just following up on both their questions, you might have touched on this a little bit, but do you feel that it's too late? If they're going to be voting on the floor on this week, and I know you mentioned.
Well, sadly, we don't set the schedule. There was a day and time where we had more influence on that, and so we didn't know when they were going to bring this bill till the last minute. I mean, we didn't know until a few days ago they're going to have 10 Medicare for All bills before our committee, I think, tomorrow. And so they're just cramming stuff through. And so we moved as soon as we heard they were going to have their bill on the floor. I wanted, our colleagues wanted, American people want a substantive alternative to become law. As you know, the president has weighed in on this matter, is not a fan of H.R. 3. Their bill is not going to become law. It's an exercise in politics over policy, tragically. We've, again, looked at what's gone on in the Senate. We've looked at what we can get done here, and we think this is a solid, thoughtful alternative that would actually positively impact the market.
I'm going to add to this that the fact that this is so heavily focused on bipartisan solutions tells you we are more interested in policy than politics. And the fact that the HR 3 was pulled out of the Speaker's office as happened the 4 years that Nancy Pelosi was Speaker before, things just got dumped in the laps of the committees and things got brought straight to the floor that never went through committee. It's their style of operating, totally different from our style of operating, which is to look for bipartisan solutions. And I think that's an important part of this story here. This is policy focused, good for the American people, not trying to score political points.
One more.
You said that most of it is the Senate Finance Bill, or the
There's a lot of the
No, no.
Senate finance bill in this bill, yeah.
But of course, the inflation fines that are
That's
supposed
right.
to be a bulk of the savings from that aren't in this. Do you think that this without that's enough, basically, to offset these other expected measures? And then also, would you consider adding inflation fines or supporting?
What I would start with is the things where we think we can have agreement. That's one that I think they can't even pass in the Senate, most likely. And again, we were trying to find the things where we have common ground. And so I would try to refocus you to look at all the things that are in here, not the few things that are not, recognizing some people support that. I'm not a fan of adopting the sort of arbitrary caps like that. So we focused on things we think make good policy sense.
And the truth is, we've already begun discussions with the Senate and the White House
Yep.
on a bipartisan consensus here. You asked about timing. Look, it's always the right time to bring bipartisan solutions to the floor. We deserve a straight up or down vote because it represents the priorities of Republicans and Democrats. The sooner we can have that, sooner we can have that conversation, sooner we can get this to the president's desk.
Thank you all for coming out.
Thanks.